Welcome to Mindset Matters Book Club YouTube channel. Please subscribe and like to hear new book summaries.
It's great to be here. And today we're diving into a story that on the surface feels like it's about a really specific American debate. You know, public school versus homeschooling.
Right.
But as you start to peel back the layers of Homeschooled, a memoir by Stefan Merrill Block, you find something so much darker and I think much more universal.
It really is a Trojan horse of a book, isn't it? You go in thinking, okay, this is an education manifesto, maybe a quirky coming-of-age story about a kid, learning at the kitchen table.
Yeah, exactly.
And instead, what you get is this deeply intense psychological thriller set in the suburbs of Plano, Texas in the early 90s.
It's almost a gothic horror story disguised as a memoir. You have the setting, right? This high-pressure, rapidly expanding suburb. You have the characters. A really sensitive boy, Stefan, who feels like he's being crushed by the factory of public school. And then you have his mother, charismatic but also deeply traumatized, who offers him this escape.
But the escape hatch, as you soon find out, is really a trapdoor.
That's the perfect way to put it. And so our mission for this deep dive is to really explore the mechanics of that trap. We're not just going to summarize the plot here.
No.
We're going to try and analyze the psychology of what they call enmeshment, that really blurry line where a parent ends and a child begins. We have to look at how trauma is generational, how it gets passed down. And I think critically, we have to look at the legal vacuum that allowed this school of one to even exist.
And just so everyone's clear, everything we're talking about today, it all comes directly from Block's memoir.
Right.
He does a really masterful job of blending his own memories, which are just so vivid and painful, with family history uncovered later and also some pretty rigorous research into the whole homeschooling movement itself.
He really does his homework.
So let's go back. Let's go back to Plano. To that moment when Stefan decides he just has to get out.
Part 1, The Great Escape and the School of One. And it really does begin with this sense of suffocation. Stefan is in elementary school, and he describes it as this gray monotony. He feels physically sick at the thought of it all. The bells, the lines, the fluorescent lights.
It's that classic feeling of being a cog in a machine. And his mother, just by listening to him, she validates it completely. She doesn't say, tough it out, kid.
Right.
She tells him, you're right, it is a factory.
Yes.
And you are far too special for a factory.
And that validation for a child, it's like a drug. It's addictive.
Right.
But Stefan knows he needs a catalyst. He can't just quit school. So he stages an accident.
And we're not talking about faking a stomachache here. This isn't, holding the thermometer up to a light bulb.
No, this is visceral. He goes to this creek near their house. He finds a 15-foot limestone cliff, and he just throws himself off it.
We have to pause on that for a second. The logic there. A child is thinking, the only way out of school is to physically break my own body. I mean, that is a terrifying calculus.
It is. And he writes about that internal narrative. He's fantasizing that if he's broken, his mother will finally just take care of him. It's a regression fantasy.
He wants to be an invalid.
He literally pictures eating Jell-O, watching game shows, and just being held. He wants to be an invalid because invalids are safe. He wants to stop the forward motion of his life.
So he jumps. He tumbles down, gets all battered and bloody. He drags himself home, sobbing. And his mother's reaction, this is the first huge red flag in the book.
Any normal parenting script would be, oh my God, are you okay? We have to go to the ER. But she doesn't do that. She looks at him all bruised and bleeding, and she sort of smiles.
That's chilling.
She says, I know what you're doing. I think you want it to be broken. It's school.
She diagnoses the psychological root cause immediately. But instead of being horrified that her son just threw himself off a cliff to avoid math class, she uses it as ammunition against the school system.
She leverages the crisis. She tells him that the so-called professionals at the school, they're destroying him. She positions herself as his savior. She says, I won't let them have you.
And right there, the pact is sealed.
It is.
Yeah.
He isn't going back. She essentially tells him that his act of self-harm was a totally rational response to an irrational system.
Which then begins the school of one.
Yeah.
And initially, it sounds kind of idyllic.
On paper, it sounds incredible. A bespoke education, tailored to a child's unique genius. They set up the dining room table. They go to the teacher supply store, which Stefan describes as this magical place. They buy the textbooks. It all feels so rigorous.
Like they're going to build something better.
But that rigor, it has a shelf life of what, maybe a week? And this is where we have to talk about the teacher's edition incident, because this is the moment the education part of homeschooling really dies and the illusion takes over.
It's just a masterclass in self-deception.
It really is. So they're doing math, Saxon math specifically. The mother orders the textbooks, but she also orders the teacher's edition for herself, the one with all the answers in the back. The plan is she'll grade his work. Seems standard.
A solid plan, if the teacher's actually in the room.
Right. But the phone rings. Or she gets distracted. She leaves the room, and she leaves the answer key right there on the table next to Stefan. And, well, Stefan's a bright kid, but he's also a kid who hates doing repetitive math problems.
Of course.
So he looks at the book, he looks at his paper, and he just starts copying.
He copies 2 weeks' worth of answers in 30 minutes and writes 100 at the top of the page. It's so blatant, it's almost funny.
But the tragedy is in her reaction when she comes back. She sees this impossible amount of work done perfectly in half an hour, and she doesn't question it. Not for a second.
She doesn't check his work.
She doesn't wonder why he didn't show his work. She just instantly believes he's a prodigy.
She says, I knew it. The school was holding you back. You're a math genius.
Yeah. She builds this entire reality where he is special, and she's the only person on earth who truly understands him. And Stefan, he knows he's a fraud. He knows he cheated. But her praise is so warm, so validating, that he just can't bring himself to tell her the truth.
He accepts the genius label.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's what binds them together. If he admits he cheated, he shatters the whole fantasy that she saved him.
It becomes a mutual delusion. He pretends to learn and she pretends to teach. And this dynamic, it just spreads to everything. The whole structured dining room school completely dissolves.
It shifts into what she calls passion-led learning.
And this is where we need to talk about the philosophy she was using, or maybe weaponizing. She was a huge devotee of an educator named John Holt.
Oh, right, John Holt. Big figure in the 60s and 70s. He wrote How Children Fail.
Holt was a radical thinker, and a lot of his ideas are really compelling. He argued that the very structure of school, the testing, the fear of failure, the rigid curriculum, it actually shuts down a child's natural curiosity.
His idea was that if you just leave kids alone, they'll learn on their own because humans are just natural learning machines. Unschooling, he called it.
Right. But unschooling, in Holt's vision, implies deep engagement with the world. It means going to museums, building things, exploring nature, talking to people.
It means more world, not less.
Exactly. But Stefan's mother just cherry-picked the theory. She used passion-led learning to justify total isolation. For Stefan, following his passions just meant reading Star Trek novels, watching daytime TV, and, obsessing over his own anxiety.
She used the language of educational liberation to mask what was basically neglect.
That is the key. Neglect wrapped in the language of freedom. She wasn't ignoring him, she was freeing him. It's a brilliant psychological defense because it makes her the hero of the story even as she's failing him. She convinced herself his lethargy was just intellectual incubation.
And the most painful irony is that she could teach. She started a whole business tutoring other kids.
The arithmetics, that's what she called her business. This part of the book is just gut-wrenching. The mother realizes she needs money, so she turns the entire downstairs of their house into this bustling tutoring center.
And she becomes the fun math lady for all the neighborhood kids.
Mm.
She's engaging, she's bright, she uses games.
Meanwhile, her own son, the supposed genius, is just alone upstairs in his room reading comic books.
Wow.
It's the stark division. Downstairs is the public performance of the good, innovative mother, and upstairs is the grim reality of the hidden child. He writes about hearing the laughter from downstairs kids his own age, laughing with his mom, and just feeling completely displaced. He wasn't the student anymore. He was the secret.
And that feeling of being replaceable, it really culminates with the introduction of Martin. This part of the book is just, it's so unsettling.
It's incredibly unsettling. Later in the timeline, when Stefan starts to pull away and wants to go back to school, his mother convinces another family neighbors that the school system is failing their son, Martin.
So she just recruits a new son.
She literally does. She convinces them to pull Martin out of school and let her homeschool him instead. Stefan describes coming downstairs and seeing Martin sitting in his old chair at his old table, reading his old books, and looking up at his mother with that same adoration that Stefan used to have.
Oh, that's brutal.
It confirmed his absolute worst fear, that his mother didn't need him specifically. She just needed a dependent. She needed someone to need her. And if Stefan wasn't going to play that role anymore, well, Martin would do just fine.
And that profound need for dependency, that really brings us to the emotional core of the book. We've talked about the school part. Now we have to talk about the isolation. So, part 2, the geography of loneliness.
Loneliness in this memoir isn't just an emotion, it's an actual environment. It's a place. Stefan creates this recurring fictional world in his writing that he calls Nowheresville.
Tell us a bit about Nowheresville.
In his stories, there's this boy who lives in Nowheresville, a place that's not on any map. And this boy has a superpower. He can telepathically communicate with other lonely people. He can hear the thoughts of everyone else who is isolated.
That is so heartbreakingly profound for a 10-year-old boy. He's literally trying to weaponize his own isolation to find connection.
He's trying to find a way to be alone together. He couldn't physically be with other kids, so he just invented a psychic network for them. It just shows you how desperate he was for peers. But in the real world, his mother was actively severing all of those connections.
She had that whole narrative for his old friends, right? The kids who were still in school.
The suckers, that was her word for them. Noah, Tiffany, his old playmates, they were suckers. They were slaves to the system. They were becoming boring, average, gray.
She told them that hanging out with them would, infect him with their mediocrity. If you play with them, you'll become like them.
Exactly. And for a child who's been told he's a genius and a special case, that is a powerful threat. So he started to look at his friends with this mix of pity and disdain. He pushed them away. It was a defense mechanism, you know. If you weren't invited to the party, it hurts less if you convince yourself the party is for losers.
But deep down, he knew he was the one missing out.
Of course. So he's isolated in Plano, but the isolation gets even deeper, even more concentrated when they go to New Hampshire for the summers, to a place they called Echo Cottage.
Echo Cottage. It sounds beautiful, but in the book, it feels haunted.
It does, and this is where we really get the why. We finally understand what drove his mother to this extreme. It wasn't just some quirky educational philosophy. It was deep, unresolved trauma from her own childhood.
The polio story.
Yes. This is the Rosetta Stone for understanding his mother. When she was a very little girl around 1950, there was a polio scare. She had a fever. The doctor suspected polio. And in those days, the protocol was just brutal. She was taken to a hospital and put in strict quarantine.
And she describes being behind a glass wall.
A glass wall separating her from her parents. She remembers screaming, banging on the glass, begging them to come get her. She was convinced she'd been abandoned. She thought she was going to die there, all alone.
And the worst part.
The diagnosis was wrong. She never had polio.
Oh, my God. So she went through that absolute torture for nothing.
And in her mind, the lesson was seared in forever. The experts are dangerous idiots. Separation is death. And if you let your child go behind a wall, whether it's a hospital wall or a school wall, you might never get them back.
Wow. That completely recontextualizes everything.
Yeah.
When she keeps Steph at home, she's not just saving him from a boring math class. She's saving him from the quarantine ward.
She is projecting her own terrified 4-year-old self onto him. She looks at Stefan and she sees herself behind that glass. So the School of One isn't a school at all. It's a fortress. It's designed to keep the world out. She's trying to rewrite her own history through her son.
But you can't keep the world out forever. Reality has a way of knocking on the door. And in this story, reality shows up looking like a grandmother named Mimi.
I love Grandma Mimi. She's the character who just comes in and bursts the whole bubble. She's flamboyant, she wears loud jewelry, she smokes, and she has absolutely zero patience for her daughter's theories.
She comes to visit them in Texas, takes one look at Stefan sitting around in his pajamas at 11 a.m. on a weekday, and she just calls it what it is.
She has that incredible line, "A boy on a Thursday should be in a school."
It's so simple and so cutting, it just slices right through all the jargon about passion-led learning. She sees a lonely, uneducated boy, and she confronts Stefan about it directly.
And this is the pivot point. Stefan is terrified that Mimi is going to expose him to his mother, that she'll reveal that the whole genius thing is a total lie.
And that fear, it's like a splash of cold water. It wakes him up. He realizes he can't keep living this lie. He goes to his mother and tells her he wants to go back to school. But, and this is so crucial, he feels like a traitor for saying it.
He describes the guilt as being physical, like he's literally stabbing her in the back.
That's the power of enmeshment right there. He feels responsible for her emotional state. He knows that by leaving, he is stripping her of her entire identity as the protector.
But the loneliness has just become too much. He chooses the unknown terror of high school over the known misery of Nowheresville.
And that brings us to part 3, re-entry and the suicide capital. Stefan goes back. 9th grade. Shepton High School.
I mean, can you imagine? It's like landing on Mars without a spacesuit. He's been out of the social loop for years. He completely missed the brutal social formatting of middle school.
And physically, he's not doing well.
Not at all. He's a very late bloomer. He's 14, maybe 15, but he looks 11. No body hair, a high voice, and just severe crippling acne. And teenagers, they're like sharks. They smell blood in the water.
They give him nicknames. Where's the beef?
And Mini Bert. There was this other husky kid named Bert, and they said Stefan looked like his miniature version. He felt like a different species. He describes taking this anthropological approach to high school. He would watch how other boys walked, how they held their backpacks, just trying to mimic them.
He tried to be invisible. He talks about looking at the floor tiles, mapping the entire school by the patterns on the floor, just so he wouldn't have to make eye contact with anyone.
But he couldn't just fade into the background because of where he was. We have to talk about Plano, Texas in the 90s. This wasn't just any high school. This was a pressure cooker.
The book refers to it as the suicide capital.
It was a very dark time for the town. There was a string of teen suicides, a cluster of them. Stefan specifically mentions a boy named Eric Almond. It just shook the whole community. And it made Stefan realize that the sucker's narrative his mother had fed him wasn't entirely wrong. It was just incomplete.
How so?
Well, his mother had said school makes you a robot. What Stefan found was that the pressure in Plano, the obsession with grades, the expensive cars, the absolute necessity of getting into an Ivy League school, it was its own kind of sickness. The ambition of the town was toxic.
But Stefan, being the chameleon he had become, he decides to win at that game too.
He cracks the code. He figures out that school is just another system with rules you can learn. He studies obsessively. He wins the science fair. He wins the Golden Scroll Award for writing. He becomes a super high achiever.
But he felt completely empty.
Because it was still a performance. He was performing the genius for his mother before. Now he was performing the successful student for the whole town. Inside, he still felt like the boy from Nowheresville. He constantly calls himself a fraud during this period.
And what about his mother? You'd think she'd be thrilled. Her son is winning all these awards.
Oh, no, not at all. Every single award was a betrayal. Every day he went to school was a day he chose the world over her. She saw his integration as a kind of death. She would literally claim it was making her physically sick.
She would have these physical manifestations of illness every time he had a success outside the home.
And she tried to manipulate him with that bizarre gender theory she had. The hand theory.
The boy hand versus girl hand. It's so strange, but so revealing about her mindset.
It is. She would hold up her hands and she'd say that Stefan's older brother, Aaron, had boy hands. Square, rough, independent. But Stefan, she said he had girl hands. Long fingers, sensitive, artistic, just like hers.
It's like she's trying to say, your biology dictates that you belong with me. You aren't built for the rough world of men.
It was her last-ditch effort to keep him in her orbit. She was trying to gender code his enmeshment. If he leaves, he's betraying his own fundamental nature. She wanted him to believe he was physically incapable of surviving without her.
But he does leave. He graduates, he escapes to college, he moves all the way to New York City. Which brings us to part 4, the long shadow of homeschooling.
And you'd think, okay, he made it, he's free, he's in New York City, he's a writer, it's a success story. But drama, it doesn't respect state lines.
He becomes what he calls an adult homeschooler.
It's such a tragic regression. He's in his 20s, living in one of the most vibrant cities on the planet, and he just retreats. He stays in his apartment for days on end. He stops showering. He lets trash pile up. He essentially recreates the School of One in a tiny Brooklyn apartment.
He realizes that physical distance isn't the same thing as emotional separation.
Not at all. He's still carrying this immense guilt. He feels that his independence is actively harming his mother back in Texas. He can't enjoy his own life because he feels like he stole it from her. He's haunted by the idea that his freedom is literally killing her.
We should probably contrast him with his brother, Aaron. Aaron is kind of like the control group in this whole psychological experiment.
Aaron is a fascinating character. He went to public school earlier. He seems to have rejected the enmeshment. He establishes very hard boundaries. He marries a woman named Nikki, and the mother hates Nikki.
The mother actually tells Aaron, if you stay with her, the stress of it will kill you by age 45.
I mean, can you imagine? She literally predicts his death as a form of manipulation. But Aaron just ignores her. He chooses his wife, he accepts that his mother will be angry, and he just lives his life anyway. Stefan looks at his brother with this sense of awe. He can't understand how Aaron can just not care.
But Aaron had to pay a price too. He had to accept being the bad son in their mother's story.
That's right. And Stefan is still trying to be the good son, still trying to save her, but she's beyond saving. Her decline in the final act of the book is it's rapid and it's horrific.
It really is. The mental health issues that are always bubbling under the surface, the paranoia, the anxiety, they just take over completely. She starts believing the FBI is watching the house. She thinks insurance companies are conspiring against her.
And she starts to self-medicate heavily.
Late-stage alcoholism. She spends her days in what she calls a zero-gravity chair because her back pain is so severe, and she just retreats into this fog of vodka and delusion.
And of course, because she fundamentally distrusts doctors, the core tenet of her entire philosophy, she ignores all the warning signs her own body is giving her.
She has a terrible cough. She's in constant pain. But she refuses to see the quacks. By the time she's finally forced to go to a hospital, it's stage 4 lung cancer.
Stefan calls it a slow-motion suicide.
Which it is. Her own worldview killed her. The same belief system that kept Stefan out of school is the one that kept her out of the doctor's office. She thought she was protecting herself from the system, but the system was the only thing that could have saved her.
And this brings us to the end, part 5, reckoning and legacy. And the timing of it all is just... well, you couldn't write it in a novel because it would feel too contrived, but it's all true.
It's 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic hits. The entire world goes into lockdown. The whole world becomes homeschooled in a strange way.
Exactly. And in the middle of this global isolation, Stefan's mother is dying, and at the very same time, his wife is giving birth to their first child, a daughter.
The circle of life happening over Zoom calls.
And because of the pandemic protocols, his mother never gets to meet her granddaughter. She dies without ever holding her. But even in her final days, in hospice, she's delirious and she's texting Stefan.
What is she texting them about?
Rugs, furniture. She's hallucinating that she is buying a massive house where they will all live together. Stefan, his wife, the new baby, and her.
So even on her deathbed, her ultimate dream is the commune. The school of one expanded to become the school of everyone.
She never, ever gave up on that dream of total enmeshment. She wanted them all safe inside with her forever. And it's so heartbreaking because it came from a place of love, but it was a love that consumes instead of nurtures.
Now, Block doesn't just end with a personal tragedy. He zooms out. He looks at the legal landscape. Because when you read this, you have to ask yourself, how is this even legal? Can a parent just keep a kid home, teach them absolutely nothing, and let them spiral?
And in Texas, at that time, the answer was yes. Block outlines the legal history, specifically a court case called Leeper v. Arlington. And that case effectively gutted any meaningful state oversight of homeschooling in Texas.
He points out that in many states, you have to register, you have to show a curriculum, maybe take some standardized tests. But in Texas,
it's the Wild West. No registration, no testing, no home visits. If you simply say you are homeschooling your child, the state backs off completely. The assumption is that parental rights supersede almost everything else.
And he cites the work of the Coalition for Responsible Home Education, the CRHE.
Right. And it's a really important distinction to make here. The book is not an attack on all homeschooling. There are millions of families who do it beautifully with socialization and rigorous academics. But what the CRHE argues is that the total lack of checks and balances creates a dangerous loophole for abuse.
It becomes a shield. If you want to hide abuse or neglect or even just your own profound mental illness, homeschooling can provide the perfect legal cover.
Precisely. Stefan makes the case that society owes every child a safety net. A child shouldn't be solely dependent on the mental stability of their parents for their entire connection to the outside world. There needs to be a third party, someone to check the math, both literally and metaphorically.
It's a really compelling argument that education is a right of the child, not just a choice of the parent.
And he closes the book with this powerful, devastating image of his relationship with his mother. He calls himself the Arrow.
The Arrow. Explain that.
He says his mother spent her whole life building this suit of armor to keep the world out. But he was the arrow that finally pierced that armor.
Meaning that for him to grow up, for him to become a functional human being, he had to hurt her. He had to leave. His independence was the very weapon that broke her heart.
He had to wound her to save himself.
That is the ultimate tragedy of the overprotective parent. If you hold on too tight, the child's natural process of growth becomes an act of violence against you. And Stefan has to carry the scar of knowing he was the thing that destroyed his mother's illusion.
And now he has his own daughter. And the book leaves him with that question. Can he break the cycle?
He knows the geography of Nowheresville. He knows the warning signs.
And I think the book itself is his attempt to break that cycle. By telling the truth, by exposing the school of one to the light of day, he's choosing connection over secrecy. He is choosing to live in the real world, flaws and all.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, after going from that cliff edge in Plano all the way to the empty apartment in New York, what's the big takeaway here?
I think the core question of the book is about that fine line between protection and prison.
Say more about that.
We all want to keep our loved ones safe, right? We all want to shield our kids from the bad parts of the world, the bullies, the pressure, the danger. But Stefan's mother is this tragic proof that you can be so afraid of the world that you yourself become the danger.
The bubble becomes a cell.
Exactly. And in our modern world, where we can all curate our own news, curate our social feeds, work from home, it is easier than ever to build our own school of one. We can all retreat into our own private realities. This book is a profound warning. If you lock all the doors to keep the monsters out, you might just find you've locked yourself in with your own ghosts.
Wow. If you lock the doors to keep the monsters out, you lock yourself in with your ghosts. That is definitely going to stick with me.
It's a haunting thought, isn't it?
It is. Well, we want to know what you think. Did you relate to Stefan's feelings of isolation? Do you think there should be more oversight on homeschooling? Let us know in the comments below.
And please, if you found this discussion valuable, don't forget to subscribe and like the Mindset Matters Book Club YouTube channel.
We will see you in the next deep dive. Keep reading and keep the doors open.